A $400 million construction project ground to a halt over 3 inches of land nobody thought twice about, until the woman who owned it pulled a folded paper from 1970 out of a kraft envelope and laid it on the table. What Dennis Calloway handed to a 12-year-old girl as a joke took him 23 years to understand. Philip Dodd had been a property lawyer in Whitmore County for 31 years. He did not panic. That was the first thing people said about him. Philip Dodd does not panic. He was panicking. The call came at 7:14 on a Tuesday morning, and by the time he set the phone down, his coffee had gone cold, and he had not noticed. Fernway Industrial LLC, a logistics company with a $400 million contract, 90 units going up on the old Hendricks tract, bulldozers already scheduled, had a problem. Their title search had flagged an easement. Active, recorded, never vacated. And the easement ran directly through a surveyed strip along the southern edge of the property, 3 inches wide at its northern point, 18 inches at the survey pin. Parcel 004A. Philip pulled the file. He looked at the owner of record. He looked again. He had been too late from the moment the phone rang. Whitmore County held its land auctions in the old Civic Hall on Route 9, a building that smelled like floor wax and old coffee, folding tables, metal chairs, a coffee pot in the corner that nobody ever cleaned. 4 locals in the back row, who came every year mostly out of habit. It was a Tuesday in August, and the heat sat heavy over everything. Dennis Calloway stood near the front. He was not the kind of man who sat at folding tables. He stood in a jacket that cost more than most people in that room made in a month, and he had the loose, comfortable look of someone who had already decided how the day would go. Calloway Development LLC had been buying up parcels around the old Hendricks tract for 2 years, piece by piece, patient, in the way that money is patient. The main parcel, 4.2 acres of scrub and old fence posts east of the highway, was the anchor. Everything else was paperwork. The auctioneer moved through the lots in order. When he reached parcel 004A, he paused. Read it once. Read it again. A surveyed strip, 004A, split from the Hendricks main parcel in 1963 during a road widening dispute. No road was ever widened. The strip had sat in the county record ever since, a sliver too thin to build on, too thin to fence, thin enough that 3 different county officials had recommended dissolving it back into the main parcel. Nobody had ever done the paperwork. Nobody raised a hand. Calloway looked across the tables. He found what he was looking at, a girl in a plastic chair beside an old man, 12 years old, maybe 13, but probably 12. She had a notebook on her lap and a pen in her hand, and she was watching the auctioneer, the way a person watches something they have been waiting for. Calloway smiled. He said it loud enough for the room. Take it, kid. Maybe one day it'll buy you a stick of gum. 2 of the 4 men in the back row laughed. Not hard. The way people laugh at something that is simply, obviously true. The auctioneer looked at the girl. She looked at the auctioneer. Her grandfather, a man named Roy Voss, rancher, 64 years old, not easily moved, leaned over and signed the transfer as her guardian. 0 consideration. The girl wrote the parcel number in her notebook in blue ink. She underlined it once. That was all. Calloway turned back to the main parcel and bought it for $312,000 without looking at her again. Her name was Clara Voss, 12 years old, and she did not laugh. Roy drove her home after. They did not talk much. Clara kept the notebook on her lap and looked out the window at the flat land going past. Roy's hands were on the wheel. After a while he said, "You know that strip isn't worth a thing." Clara said, "I know." Roy nodded. That was the end of it. That evening Clara sat at the kitchen table while her grandfather made supper. She opened the notebook to the page with the parcel number and read it once. Then she opened the kraft envelope she kept inside the back cover, the one Roy had stopped asking about 8 months ago, and looked at what was inside. A photocopy. Old, typed on carbon paper, folded 3 times. She read it the same way she always read it, slowly, all the way through. Then she folded it back along the same creases and put it away. The supper was ready, and she closed the notebook and went to eat. She did not tell Roy what was in the envelope. She did not tell anyone. But something in that folded paper connected to the parcel number she had just written in blue ink, and the connection was as clean and solid as a survey pin driven into bedrock. Calloway had handed it to her like a joke. Clara already knew it was not a joke. She just needed everyone else to catch up. Before this goes any further, hit subscribe right now, because what's about to happen is something nobody in that auction hall ever saw coming, and you are not going to want to miss it. The paper smelled like dust and old rooms. Clara found it on a Tuesday afternoon in March, 3 years before the auction, inside a manila sleeve that had been filed under the wrong year. She was 9. She had not gone to the Whitmore County Records Room looking for anything in particular. Roy had asked her to pull the old homestead plat, a simple enough job, something Mrs. Arndt at the front desk let Clara do herself, because Clara had learned the microfiche reader without breaking anything. Most adults broke something the first time. The sleeve was labeled 1972. The document inside was dated April 4th, 1970. Clara read it once, then twice, then a third time, slowly, with her finger moving beneath each line. It was a county survey memo, typed on carbon paper, signed by a surveyor named T. Beaumont. Beaumont had been dead for 20 years. His handwriting was neat and small, and the ink had faded to a pale gray-brown, but every word was still legible. The memo described a utilities easement, a planned power relay corridor running through the southeastern edge of the Hendricks Tract. The project had been canceled before construction. The easement had never been formally vacated. An easement that is never vacated is still legally active. Clara did not fully understand what that meant. She was 9, but she understood that something had been left open when it should have been closed, and that nobody had noticed, and that nobody was looking. She asked Mrs. Arndt for a photocopy. She folded it 3 times and put it in the back of her notebook. She wrote one word next to it in pencil: keep. Over the next 2 years, she went back to the records room every few months. Never urgently. Always on a Tuesday, because Tuesday mornings were quiet, and Mrs. Arndt let her use the reader without signing in. She pulled the 1963 road widening file. She found the resolution that created parcel 004A. The sliver split off from the Hendricks main parcel when the county planned to widen Route 9. The road was never widened. The parcel was never reabsorbed. She found a 1956 utilities filing, older than the Beaumont memo, describing the same corridor in slightly different language. Different surveyor. Same coordinates. She found a commissioner's note from 1971, recommending the easement be vacated. One paragraph stamped, filed, and forgotten. She looked for the executed vacation order. There was no executed vacation order. The easement was still open. She put everything in the kraft envelope. One evening in November, Clara sat at the kitchen table with a blank sheet of paper and drew a map by hand. She drew the Hendricks Tract. She drew the survey pins. She drew the 1956 corridor and the 1970 memo coordinates in pencil, using a ruler. She drew the planned Route 9 widening from the 1963 file. She drew parcel 004A as a thin line along the southern edge. Then she drew what else was along the southern edge. The county's only viable eastern access corridor for a logistics hub or distribution facility. Any developer who wanted to run heavy trucks to the back of the Hendricks Tract without adding 2 miles of new road would need right-of-way through or over the southeastern survey line, which ran through parcel 004A, which had an active utility easement that no one had closed, which meant the land could not be quietly absorbed or built upon without triggering a county claim that would freeze any permit in its first week. Clara's grandmother came to the doorway and looked at the map and the envelope and the notebook. Her name was Dory. She had been watching Clara do this for 6 months without saying anything. She said, "What are you working on?" Clara said, "Something I need to keep track of." Dory looked at her for a moment. Then she went back to the kitchen. She had the same quality Roy had. She knew when to stop asking. The confirmation came on a Wednesday in February. Clara was 11. She had pulled Calloway Development's tax filings from the county assessor's office. They were public record, available in a printed binder at the front desk, and nobody had ever asked to see them before. The tax parcel map attached to Calloway's annual filings showed the main Hendricks Tract. It showed parcel 004-A as absorbed. Included, part of the same lot. Calloway had been claiming tax basis on land he did not own. He had been filing this every year since 2009. The county had accepted the filings every year. No one had corrected the map. Clara closed the binder. She sat for a while. She was 11 years old, sitting at a county assessor's desk, and she had just confirmed that a development company worth considerably more than anything in Whitmore County had been quietly assuming ownership of a parcel it had no legal claim to, and that the parcel itself carried an active easement that would stop any large commercial development cold the moment someone looked. She took out the notebook. She drew a small circle around parcel 004-A on the hand-drawn map she kept inside the back cover. She did not write anything next to it. She did not need to. $47,000. The man on the porch said it like it should end the conversation. He was polished. Young, wore a jacket without a wrinkle in it, holding a folder from something called Western Meridian Properties, a name Clara did not recognize but Roy did. A land assembly subsidiary, Calloway, had been running under different names since 2011. Clara was 16. She answered the door. The agent said the company was interested in acquiring a small parcel for a consolidation project. He said it with the friendly confidence of a man who had never been told no on a front porch. Clara said, "Which parcel?" He said, 004A. She said, "Not for sale." He left a business card. Clara put it in the Kraft envelope alongside the Beaumont memo and the 1956 filing and the commissioner's note. Roy watched from the kitchen doorway. He said, "That was a lot of money." Clara said, "Not yet, it wasn't." Roy went back to his coffee. The second offer came by phone. A county planning officer, formal, precise, reading from something. The county was pursuing a utility infrastructure upgrade along the southeastern corridor, a new relay line, a right-of-way consolidation, a voluntary acquisition program. They were prepared to offer $8,000 for parcel 004A as part of the program. Clara was 17. She listened to the entire offer without interrupting. She thanked the officer for the call. She declined. Dory was at the kitchen table when Clara hung up. She looked up from her book. She said, "How much?" Clara said, $8,000. Dory said, "You said no." Clara said, "They're trying to acquire what they already have access to. They want us to sign something that makes them feel safer. We're not going to do that." Dory looked at her for a long moment. Then she turned the page. That was all. Clara paid the annual tax bill on parcel 004A every spring without fail. $43. Then $51. Then $68 as the county revalued the corridor for utilities purposes, which Clara noticed and wrote down because the revaluation was the county confirming in its own documents that the easement corridor was active and relevant. She mowed the strip twice a year, spring and fall. It took 11 minutes each time. She kept the survey markers clear. She kept the parcel lines visible. She did not fence it. She did not improve it. She simply kept it. Some pieces of land stay valuable because people fight over them. This one stayed valuable because one person paid attention to it when no one else did. Somewhere else, in an office with a long glass table and a view Clara had never seen, Dennis Calloway was having a different kind of year. The logistics contract had gone to Fernway Industrial. 90 units, $400 million. Groundbreaking scheduled, his company had agreed to deliver clean title to the full Hendricks tract by the start of the permit process. His lawyer had flagged 004A. Calloway had told him to handle it. His lawyer had sent the polished agent in the wrinkle-free jacket. Then the county. Then, on a gray November morning, the lawyer made the call himself. His name was Arthur Lim. He drove 2.5 hours from the city, and he sat at Clara's kitchen table in a 3-piece suit with a leather briefcase and accepted a cup of coffee without being asked twice. He put a number on the table, $90,000. He called it a full and fair settlement. He called it generous. He called it a one-time offer with a 2-week window. Clara was 19. She picked up her coffee cup. She set it down. She said, "Not for sale." Lim said, "Miss Voss, I want to make sure you understand the scope of what's being developed here." Clara said, "I understand it fine." Lim said, "This offer won't come back at this number." Clara said, "I know." Lim closed his briefcase. He thanked her for the coffee. He drove 2.5 hours back. In the hallway, before he came in, Clara's daughter had watched from the top of the stairs. She was 8 then. She came down after Lim left and looked at her mother. She said, "Who was that?" Clara said, "A man who thought he could buy something that wasn't for sale." Her daughter thought about this. Then she said, "What was he trying to buy?" Clara said, "Time." Her daughter went back upstairs. She would remember that answer for 15 years. Calloway's permit process started its clock. Clara knew this because the county posted public notices, and Clara read the public notices. Fernway's timeline had no room in it. 90 units, structured financing, contractor schedules. A title dispute that surfaced mid-process would not delay the project by weeks. It would freeze it entirely. Calloway had one option left. He had to come back. On a Thursday morning in October, Clara's phone rang. Unfamiliar number. City area code. Clara looked at the number for a moment. She picked up. 90,000 was off the table. Arthur Lim said this before Clara could finish saying hello. He said a new number was being proposed. He said it was considerably more generous. He said the parties would need to meet in person to discuss. Clara said, "My daughter will be there." Lim paused. He said, "Of course." Clara hung up. Her daughter's name was Sophie. Sophie Voss was 23 years old, a property attorney 18 months out of law school, and she drove 4 hours on a Saturday morning without being asked twice. She came through the door with a satchel over one shoulder and went straight to the kitchen table. Clara set out the kraft envelope and the notebook. Sophie spread the permit file across the table next to the original deed and the photocopy of the Beaumont memo. She laid out the 1956 filing, the 1971 commissioner's note, and the 43 years of tax records Clara had printed from the county assessor's database, every one of them showing parcel 004A taxed as a separate, active, county-acknowledged parcel. Sophie read in silence for 22 minutes. Then she looked up. She said, "They never closed it." Clara said, "No." Sophie said, "And the tax records prove it was never abandoned." Clara said, "Every year, since 1963. Sophie closed the file. She picked up her phone and called Arthur Lim. The hearing was held in a county administrative room with fluorescent lights and 3 chairs on each side of a table. Fernway's legal team had raised an abandonment claim. The argument that parcel 004-A had sat idle for so long without physical improvement or fencing that the dominant landowner, Calloway, had effectively absorbed it through continued use and tax assumption. It was the strongest argument they had. Sophie set 3 documents on the table. The first, the 1956 utilities filing, establishing the corridor. The second, the 1971 commissioner's note, original, not a photocopy, front and back, with the vacation recommendation on the front page and the denial stamp on the back. The denial had never been digitized because the county's 2003 document system had only scanned first pages. The back of the note still existed only on paper. Clara had kept the original because Mrs. Arndt, in 2009, had let her check out physical documents on extended loan before the system changed and that policy ended. Clara had never returned it because nobody had ever asked. The third document, 63 years of annual tax records. Every year the county had billed and the Voss family had paid. Not Calloway, not Fernway, not any LLC. Parcel 004A had been continuously, actively, legally maintained since the day it was created. Abandonment requires absence. There had been no absence. Sophie said, the parcel was taxed every year by the county. If it had been abandoned, the county wouldn't have taxed it. The county's own records disprove the claim. The county officer presiding looked at the documents. He looked at Fernway's attorney. He ruled in 50 seconds. Fernway's attorney reached for his phone before he was out of his chair. The negotiation took 4 days. Calloway wanted a lump sum. 1 payment, clean exit, no ongoing obligation. Clara said no. His lawyers pushed back. They offered $180,000. They offered $220,000. They offered $250,000 and called it final. Clara said, monthly easement fee, permanent, transferable to my heirs, adjusted for inflation every 3 years. Lim said, that's an unusual structure. Clara said, it's the only structure. There was a pause on the line. Lim said, how much per month? Clara said, $1,400. Indexed, paid to the parcel owner in perpetuity. Any commercial operation within 200 feet of the corridor pays in. Fernway's 90-unit logistics hub sat at 140 feet from the corridor line. Lim said he would need to consult his clients. He called back in 6 hours. He accepted every term. Sophie called Clara with the news on a Thursday evening. Clara was at the kitchen table. She answered on the second ring. Sophie said, they signed. Clara said, good. Sophie said, all of it. Every term. Clara said, I know. She hung up. Dory was at the counter. She had heard enough. She turned on the kettle without saying a word. The signing was at the county clerk's office, a room with a service window and a rubber stamp, and a clerk named Paulette who had worked there for 19 years and processed documents without looking up. Clara signed 3 pages. She walked out to her truck in the parking lot. She opened the notebook, the same one Dory had given her the Christmas she was 9, the blue cover worn pale at the corners, and turned to the last page. She wrote the date, the parcel number, and one line. Easement confirmed. Terms recorded. File closed. She closed the notebook and set it on the passenger seat. 2 weeks later, Dennis Calloway read a 4-paragraph item in the Whitmore County Gazette about the easement agreement on the old Hendricks tract. He did not give a comment. Nobody quoted him. In the back row of the Civic Hall, 2 of the 4 men who had laughed at the auction 23 years ago were still living in Whitmore County. One of them read the same item over his morning coffee. He folded the paper and set it down. He did not say anything either. Some men buy land and wait for it to pay. Clara Voss bought nothing, said almost nothing, and let 63 years of county paperwork do the talking when the time was right. Would you have taken the $250,000 in cash or held out for $1,400 every single month for the rest of your life? Drop your answer below and share this with someone who needs to hear that patience is its own kind of power.